Here's some Iowa State Research Foundation recent patents. These are just the first 21 when we pulled this up sometime in the last few days. And you can see there's a lot of different technologies here. What rights are granted, I think we talked about that. International patent treaties, laws, and practice. Culture counts. You know, a lot of the stuff I've been talking about, I'm giving you a lot of information, I'm giving you a lot of facts, a lot of law. So patents are about technology, right? And they're about procedures, and they're about how to file things, but culture counts. Because we're working with people. So when I file a patent application for an inventor, the first thing that happens, well, actually nothing happens for a long time. I get an instant filing receipt because I file electronically, and then it will sit there for about a year. There's a backlog of about 500,000 patent applications right now waiting to be examined by the 8,000 examiners. And the first thing I'll hear will be a year or more from now, and the examiner will say, rejected. It's like on a basketball court. Rejected. That's obvious. Anybody could have done that. A lot of people have done things similar to that. And the way I interpret that is they're saying, tell me more. Explain to me how this technology is different from other patents. Now, one thing I try really hard not to do, because I took the Dale Carnegie course on how to win friends and influence people, is I don't tell the examiners that they're stupid. No, I try to help them understand it, and I try to help them find a way to save face. Face saving is a very important thing, of course, in Asian culture. It's an important thing in every culture, including U.S. culture. And it's an important thing in the culture of the patent office and the culture of the courts. It's an important thing in working out a settlement with an opposing party. Culture is about people, right? And understanding how people think, what motivates people, and how to help them make the right decision. The Paris Convention was in 1883, and what it says is that you can file a patent application in one country, and then within a year, if it's a utility patent, you can file that same patent application in another country and get the same benefit of the earliest filing date. Now, that isn't because we want to be generous necessarily to people from other countries, but it's because we want to get the same fair treatment for our inventors. So because we in the U.S. want our inventors to be able to get the benefit of the U.S. filing date even when they file that patent application in Japan or China or Korea or the European Patent Office a year from now, we tell those same countries by treaty through the Paris Convention. It took the U.S. 4 years to ratify this in 1887, that we were going to give those foreigners the same right that they could take their priority date, their filing date from their country, and get the benefit of that when they file in the U.S. And that's important for priority, right? Because the first to file is usually going to be the first one to get the patent even now, and that's going to be even more true in March when the America Invents Act is implemented. International IP treaties. Globalization. The Paris Convention of 1883, 174 contracting states. Basically, every country of the world respects this treaty. Its patents and intellectual property are one of the areas where there is the greatest negotiation and participation in international treaties. Globalization. The Patent Cooperation Treaty from the 1970s streamlined things even more in terms of pursuing patents in multiple countries. I already mentioned the European Patent Convention. And within Europe, they're moving towards a unitary patent. So you'll be able to get one patent that is good for all of Europe. They're not quite there yet. Who's resisting it? Patent attorneys in Italy or in Spain are not as interested in the unitary patent as patent attorneys in Germany, which is where the European Patent Office is based. So when you're thinking about culture, when you're thinking about human motivation, think about who is interested in whatever it is that you want to have done or that somebody doesn't want to have done, and why are they interested in doing it or not doing it. And that will go a long ways. And that's true in engineering too, right? When you're working with operators out in the plant, they might not have the same interest that you do. and they might not have the same timetable. I was talking with an engineer, a very good friend of this university, who does a lot of international work in the Middle East. And one of the things that he said is they don't necessarily have the same time frame that we do. It might take a year to get something done. The Japanese are famously slow at making decisions. They're very deliberate. They caucus until they agree about everything, and they can be very hard to read to the Westerner. So culture counts. Trade. There's an international agreement on trade-related IP rights. It's called TRIPS. It was negotiated at the end of the Uruguay round of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. That has to do with international trade in 1994. And what it says is that every country has to respect intellectual property, including intellectual property that's owned by people from other countries. And there's a lot of challenges in implementing that. And as you probably heard about international trade, there can be retaliation. So the U.S. says, you're not respecting our intellectual property rights, so we're going to impose a tariff on your products that come into the U.S. And then the other country says, well, we're going to impose a tariff on your cotton. And the Americans say, what does cotton have to do with intellectual property rights? But it all comes into trade. There's a substantive patent law treaty that's proposed. This is a subject of great debate. I mentioned the PCT. This has to do with the timeline for how to decide when to file a PCT application, when to enter the national phase, when to start commercializing.